Howdy everyone. I'm changing up the format of the video this time around due to certain technical and, let's be candid, emotional circumstances that have been occurring today. It's a little hard to film when I'm not really prepared for it and the machinery is just fighting with me on this matter. So I'm going to default back to the way I film a lot of my other videos, and that's just through audio sound recording and a slideshow. Now, I was considering putting all of this off until Monday when, maybe circumstances would be a little more favorable, but I realized it would be a bit of an irony if I were to do that considering what the topic of this video is about, which is habits. And I promised myself that I would make a habit of releasing videos every Sunday whenever I can. And to violate that promise to myself would really set me back. Now, there might be circumstances where that's simply going to happen, and I'll accept that. But this simply wasn't an evening where that made a lot of sense. There was nothing stopping me from actually making a version of the video. It may not be what I want, but it's something that I can do. And so that's what I'm choosing to do. I want to thank you a lot for all of your time, your patience, and especially your support.
If there's a definitive book on the nature of habits, it's probably The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg. In the book, Duhigg describes a feedback loop that reinforces the nature of our habits. The loop is made of three parts: the cue, the routine, and the reward. The cue is the trigger, the routine is the behavior, and the reward is what is received for completing the behavior. I think this is a great model for how habits happen, how they are perpetuated, and how by recognizing that the routine is the heart of all habits, the model can then provide a framework to change habits. That is, if you can even recognize your habits. Personally, I have a particularly insidious habit that took me years to recognize. When I'm watching a movie or a YouTube video or the like at home, I'll simply get up, walk into the kitchen, and look for something to eat. It's like there's some sort of truth equation in my mind that says movie equals snack. There's no truth to that, though. It's just a habit. Habits aren't truth. Habits are habits. Sometimes habits are like the ones I just described, insidious behaviors we picked up during childhood. For instance, we might snack watch YouTube because we watched our parents buy popcorn when we go to the theater. Or maybe because at home, rather than eat it at the dining room table, we'd all sit in the living room with plates below our chins while our faces were focused on the TV. Some habits come from our core being, from our genetics. Some habits come from outside ourselves. Some habits are good, most are probably benign, and it can safely be said that a few can actually be deadly in the long run. Ideally, we should work to change our habits for the better. I think we've all seen that when we've made attempts to change habits that are the bad, we can only do so through the most concentrated of efforts. Why is that? It's because we are incredibly good pattern making machines. Our brains seek the easiest path to take to resolve pretty much everything. Habits are the ultimate solution to our brain's need to make things, quote, easy for itself. When our brain sees a pattern come to light, it spends a little bit of time and energy to burn each instance into our neurons until the flow is second nature. Then, when the pattern is good enough, but not necessarily good, all the brain requires is to see the trigger, and then everything else follows with very little effort or energy on the brain's part. Trigger, behavior, result. Our brains are so good at this that we can pilot a heavy, complex piece of machinery like a car for dozens, if not hundreds of miles without even remembering how we got from home to work in the morning and then back again in the afternoon. It's sobering to think how many people you share the road with every day following this exact same routine mindlessly. We don't stop at a stop sign because we read the word stop on it or even because we see a bright red octagon. We do it out of habit because we've been driving down the same road for the past couple of years or weeks or even less. Habits don't take a lot of time to form. And for you coffee drinkers out there, you aren't actually cranky in the morning because you lack coffee. You're cranky in the morning because you think you're supposed to be cranky in the morning. You're cranky out of habit. In response to that eternal whine of morning coffee lovers who say, "But I really am cranky." Well, that's just a habit too. You had a good night's sleep, right? So why would that cause you crankiness? Okay, I'll give you, maybe you didn't have a good night's sleep. Or maybe it's just that your brain decided that morning is a good time to think cranky thoughts. Waking up in the morning is the cue. Crankiness is the routine. Coffee is the reward. Cue, routine, reward. No matter how you slice it, coffee itself isn't the solution to the crankiness. Coffee is the reward to justify an unsatisfactory behavior that is probably triggered by another habit that was caused even before you got to bed the night before. Pre-coffee crankiness is just a link in a chain of habits that dominate your life. And chains of habits are just another way our brain makes processing all of our daily efforts in life that much easier. Easier as far as the brain is concerned. You see, the brain doesn't care about how you feel. It doesn't care if you're happy or you're sad or you're cranky. Your brain just wants to keep you alive and reproducing, and it will work towards that goal through the lowest calorie expenditure and least process intensive means possible. Means that you and your family and your culture and your genes have established for you. Whatever content your brain was fed in childhood and throughout your personal experiences is locked in place as long as you fail to recognize what's going on in your life. If you're suffering for your habits, then maybe it's time to acknowledge that you can do something about it. Your brain is just a machine, and in most all of us, it's in desperate need of repair. That's the good news. It can be repaired. The challenge is that hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, thousands of years of history, generation after generation, and culture after culture have all been influential in establishing and reinforcing the patterns that our brains use to keep us alive. That is an incredible amount of psychic inertia to overcome. It is one reason that I seemingly instinctually get up during the middle of a movie at home to raid the pantry for a bag of popcorn, which, by the way, I deny myself by not keeping any bags of popcorn in the house. We often couch habits in the language of tradition or ritual or cultural norms. We think that because our ancestors did it, so must we do it. We think that because we've always done it, it must be truly the right thing to do. I personally equate movie theaters with popcorn, and by extension, even at home, movies equals snacks. Knowing this, we can start to see that many of our habits are not just part of us, but they are actually part of the rest of the world. By recognizing that habits have many influences, we can question those influences to help us find the triggers of our bad habits, see the routine that follows, and begin to intervene to make healthy and positive changes. Probably one of the most useful habits to maintain is that of questioning everything. Evaluation of one's own actions is a meta habit of sorts. Everything we do in our lives should be subject to skepticism regularly. Am I really hungry at home when I'm watching a movie? Certainly not if I just had dinner beforehand. And there's no particular reason for me to have to eat when watching a movie, at home or even in a theater. It's not a requirement to live. It's not a fundamental truth of the universe. It's just a habit. Habits have amazing power over our lives. I'm sure Charles Duhigg named his book The Power of Habits to emphasize the power of his habit feedback loop. A lot of that power comes from the triggers initiated by the outside world. Alarm clocks, work schedules, grocery store aisle layouts, holidays, mass media marketing. Any outside stimulus can be a trigger as equally as can an internal mood swing or random thought. And that is why we should question those aspects of lives that we seem to think we have the least amount of control of. Because really, nothing is that out of our control. First, don't ignore your triggers. Work to recognize those cues so that you can do something about them the next time. Second, watch what your behavior is after being triggered. Change your routines to better serve yourself. And thirdly, acknowledge that some rewards, as fulfilling as they are in the moment, aren't worth the long-term damage the triggered behavior might have caused. Choose results that lead to a more fulfilling life in the long run. Choose results that you can be proud of. Choose results your future self can have fonder memories of. Habits have power because we let our brains take the easy route a little too easily, and because our brains use cues from the outside world which are readily available and already well established. Taking the time and the effort to redirect our brain to choose better, easier routes that are personalized positively to our needs is much more psychically and socially sound in the long run, don't you think? Remember, habits are not truth. Habits are simply habits. Thanks for taking the time to listen, and I hope that you make a habit of watching my future videos. But before you go, 2 questions. What habits are you currently working on changing right now? And what habits do you have that you think might be a result of traditions from earlier generations or from your family or the like. Let me know in the comments below.